What if everything you've been fighting against in your life, the lack, the sickness, the fear, the struggle, was never actually real? What if I told you that the greatest spiritual teacher of the 20th century, Smith Wigglesworth, discovered something so profound that it completely dismantles the very foundation of human suffering? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you see your entire existence. Right now, in this very moment, you might be experiencing challenges that feel overwhelmingly real. Perhaps you're struggling with financial pressure, maybe you're dealing with health concerns, or you could be caught in relationships that drain your energy. Has this ever happened to you? You try everything, read all the books, apply all the techniques, yet nothing seems to fundamentally change. There's a reason for that, and it's not what you think. Smith Wigglesworth spent decades unraveling one of the most profound mysteries of human consciousness, and what he found challenges everything we've been taught about reality itself. He called it the material sense, a powerful illusion so convincing that billions of people live their entire lives completely trapped within it, never questioning whether what they're experiencing is actually the ultimate truth or just a very convincing appearance. But before we begin diving deeper into this revelation, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, because we're going to be exploring some of the most transformative spiritual insights ever discovered. Here's what Wigglesworth understood that most people completely miss. We spend our entire lives believing we are separate from our source, separate from abundance, separate from health, separate from peace. This one belief, this fundamental error in perception, creates what he called the pairs of opposites. We see good and evil battling it out. We experience health one day and sickness the next. We have abundance and then suddenly lack appears. Back and forth, up and down, trapped in endless cycles that seem to have no resolution. But what if I told you that these opposites don't actually exist in ultimate reality? What if the very problems you're trying to solve, the battles you're fighting, the conditions you're attempting to overcome are nothing more than shadows, appearances in consciousness that dissolve the moment you recognize what you truly are? If you're ready for more content like this, hit subscribe. I'm bringing you these deep spiritual teachings regularly, and you don't want to miss what's next. Wigglesworth didn't just teach this as philosophy. He demonstrated it through thousands of documented healings, miraculous transformations, and life-changing breakthroughs that defied every known law of material existence. And the most extraordinary part? He insisted that this same power, this same recognition, is available to every single person right now, including you. The question is, are you ready to see through the illusion? Because once you understand what Wigglesworth discovered about the nature of consciousness and reality, you can never unsee it. Your entire relationship with problems, challenges, and limitations shifts permanently, and what most people spend lifetimes trying to achieve becomes absolutely natural and effortless. Because here's the hidden truth that Wigglesworth kept pointing people toward, the revelation that changes everything. You're not trying to get something from God. You already are the fullness of God in expression. Think about that for a moment. Every single breath you're taking right now, that's not you breathing. That's God breathing as you. Every thought flowing through your mind, every impulse of creativity, every moment of inspiration, that's divine intelligence expressing itself through the unique lens of your individual consciousness. This isn't poetic language or spiritual metaphor. Wigglesworth was describing the actual nature of reality, the mechanics of existence itself. And this is where most people's entire spiritual journey goes off track. We've been conditioned to believe that spirituality is about self-improvement, about becoming better, about transforming ourselves from broken into whole, from lacking into abundant, from sick into healthy. So we pray, we meditate, we affirm, we visualize, all with this underlying assumption that we need to get somewhere we're not, that we need to become something we're not already. The entire mindset is built on lack, on separation, on the belief that perfection is out there somewhere waiting to be achieved. But Wigglesworth saw through this completely. He recognized that every ounce of mental effort we pour into trying to change our circumstances is actually reinforcing the very illusion we're trying to escape. It's like being in a dream and trying to rearrange the furniture in the dream house, never questioning whether the house itself is real. The transformation he pointed toward isn't about adding anything to yourself or fixing what's broken. It's about recognizing what's already established, what's already perfect, what's already whole. This is the critical mistake that keeps spiritual seekers trapped for decades. They're using spiritual truth as a tool to improve their human experience, when the real revelation is that there never was a human experience that needed improving in the first place. You see, you're not a person who can become more spiritual, more enlightened, more connected to Source. That's still operating from the illusion of separation. The actual truth is far more radical. You are spirit itself, pure consciousness temporarily appearing as a person, not becoming spiritual, already being the very thing you thought you needed to seek. This completely transforms what prayer actually is. Most people pray from a position of lack. God, please change my circumstances, heal my body, bring me abundance, fix this relationship. But when you recognize that God isn't something separate from you that you're petitioning, when you understand that God is your very consciousness, your awareness itself, then prayer becomes something entirely different. It becomes recognition rather than request. You're not asking for conditions to change. You're recognizing that perfection is already the only reality, and you're simply allowing your awareness to align with that truth. The shift from seeking to being is where genuine transformation begins, not the transformation of circumstances, but the transformation of your entire foundation of understanding. You stop looking for the presence you hope to find somewhere out there and start feeling the presence that you already are right here. This isn't about generating good feelings or manufacturing spiritual experiences. It's about resting in what's already true, what's already whole, what's already perfect. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what Wigglesworth discovered about healing and manifestation completely overturns everything the personal development industry teaches. Right? In the comments, I am consciousness if this perspective is starting to shift something in how you see yourself in reality. The healing work that made Wigglesworth known worldwide was built on something that sounds almost too simple to be true, yet it's the most powerful principle in all of spiritual practice. He never tried to heal anyone. Not once. Think about the implications of that statement. Here was a man documented to have facilitated thousands of healings, physical conditions that disappeared, chronic illnesses that vanished, situations that seemed medically impossible suddenly resolving, and he insisted he never healed anyone. What he did instead was recognize the spiritual perfection that was already there. He looked past the appearance of disease, past the symptoms, past the diagnosis, and saw only the unchanging spiritual reality of the person in front of him. And somehow, miraculously, that recognition dissolved the illusion. The problem didn't get fixed. It was revealed to have never been truly real in the first place, just an appearance in consciousness that couldn't stand in the presence of truth. This is such a radical departure from how we normally approach challenges. We see a problem and immediately mobilize all our mental resources to solve it. We analyze it, we strategize about it, we try different techniques and methods to overcome it. But every bit of that effort is actually affirming that the problem is real, that it has power, that it's something solid that needs to be dismantled piece by piece. Wigglesworth showed a completely different path. Simply recognize what's true and watch the illusion collapse on its own. Here's a question that can transform your entire relationship with any challenge you're facing right now. Look at whatever situation seems most difficult in your life and ask yourself, what would be true if I were pure consciousness having this experience? Not what would I do about it, not how would I solve it, but what would be true? That question shifts your entire perspective from the level of the problem to the level of reality itself. And at that level, the answer reveals something extraordinary. The problem was never happening to the real you. It was happening in the dream of separation, in the illusion of material sense. But here's where it gets even deeper, where Wigglesworth's teaching becomes almost uncomfortably direct. You cannot demonstrate truth. You can only be truth. Every single time you try to use spiritual principles to get something, to manifest abundance, to attract health, to create better circumstances, you're still operating from the fundamental illusion. You're still believing that you're a separate person who lacks something and needs to obtain it through the right technique or the right mindset or the right spiritual practice. The entire manifestation industry is built on this misunderstanding. It teaches you that abundance is something out there that you need to attract into your experience through visualization, affirmations, or aligning your vibration. But Wigglesworth saw through this completely. Abundance isn't something you attract. It's the very nature of the infinite consciousness that you are. You can't get more of what you already are in fullness. Health isn't a state you heal yourself into. It's the unchanging reality of your spiritual being that was never actually touched by any material condition. This is why people can practice spiritual techniques for years and still feel like they're chasing something just out of reach. They're trying to demonstrate truth, trying to prove that spiritual principles work, trying to make something happen. But the moment you stop trying to demonstrate and simply rest in being, something shifts. Not because you finally did the technique correctly, but because you stopped interfering with the perfection that was already flowing as your life. The journey isn't about achieving or becoming. It's about recognizing what already is and letting that recognition dissolve everything that contradicts it. What happens when you apply this understanding to actual real-world situations is nothing short of remarkable, and the stories from Wigglesworth's life show us exactly how this works in practice. Comment, I am truth. If you're beginning to feel this shift from doing to being, from seeking to recognizing what's already present. There was a businessman who came to Wigglesworth in complete desperation. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Creditors were closing in, and every door seemed to be slamming shut. For weeks before meeting Wigglesworth, he had thrown himself into spiritual practice with the intensity of someone drowning and grasping for a lifeline. Affirmations from the moment he woke up until he fell asleep. Visualization exercises, vision boards, prosperity prayers. And yet, despite all this effort, his situation only got worse. The more he tried to demonstrate prosperity, the faster his business deteriorated. When he finally sat down with Wigglesworth, expecting some new technique or more powerful method, he got something completely unexpected. Wigglesworth told him to stop. Stop trying to make his business successful. Stop trying to be prosperous. Stop all the mental gymnastics and spiritual techniques. Instead, simply recognize one truth. Infinite intelligence is the only power operating your consciousness, and infinite intelligence cannot fail. Not might not fail, not probably won't fail, cannot fail. It's impossible for the divine mind expressing as your awareness to make mistakes or encounter situations it cannot resolve perfectly. The businessman was confused, almost frustrated. This sounded like giving up, like passive resignation in the face of catastrophe. But something in Wigglesworth's certainty made him willing to try. Within 3 days of completely releasing his personal effort and simply resting in the recognition that divine intelligence was handling everything, breakthrough solutions started appearing. Ideas he'd never considered before. Connections that seemed to arise from nowhere. Opportunities that opened in the most unexpected ways. Within 6 months, not only had his business recovered, but it had expanded beyond anything he'd originally dreamed possible. The transformation happened not through his efforts, but through his surrender to what was already operating perfectly beneath all his anxious striving. Then there was a mother who brought her chronically ill child to Wigglesworth after years of exhausting every medical option available. Specialists, alternative treatments, experimental therapies. Nothing had helped. She was depleted, living in constant fear. Her entire identity wrapped around being the mother of a sick child who needed her vigilant protection and endless intervention. When she described her daughter's symptoms and medical history to Wigglesworth, he stopped her, mid-sentence. He wasn't interested in the diagnosis or the medical details. Instead, he helped this mother see something radical. Her daughter was not a sick child who needed healing. She was the perfect expression of divine life, temporarily appearing to experience illness as part of her journey, but never actually diminished or damaged in her true spiritual nature. As the mother began releasing her grip on the identity of having a sick child and started recognizing the spiritual perfection that was always there, something profound shifted. Not in the child first, but in the entire atmosphere of their home. That desperate, clawing energy of trying to fix something broken dissolved into peaceful recognition of what was already right. Over the following weeks, the child's health began improving naturally, not through any new treatment or intervention, but through the complete transformation of the mental environment surrounding her. The healing came through recognition, not through effort, through seeing truth instead of fighting illusion. The mother's shift in consciousness created space for the child's innate perfection to express itself without all the interference of fear and desperation. These stories reveal something crucial about how transformation actually happens in the real world, something that most spiritual teaching completely misses. Right, perfection is already here. If you're starting to see how releasing effort might actually be more powerful than adding more techniques to your spiritual practice. The impact of this understanding extends into every area of human experience, even the most seemingly broken situations. There was a couple who came to Wigglesworth on the absolute edge of divorce. Years of conflict had created deep wounds. Betrayal had shattered trust. Resentment had built walls so thick that they could barely stand being in the same room together. They'd tried marriage counseling, read all the relationship books, attended workshops. Everything just made them more aware of how incompatible they seemed, how fundamentally different they were, how impossible it felt to bridge the gap between them. Wigglesworth looked at them and said something that probably sounded completely disconnected from their reality. There are not two people in conflict here. There is only one consciousness appearing as two individuals, and that consciousness is love itself. Imagine hearing that when you're convinced your marriage is beyond repair. It must have seemed like spiritual bypassing, like someone telling you to just think positive while your world is falling apart. But here's what Wigglesworth was pointing toward, and it's the hidden truth behind every relationship struggle. The conflict they were experiencing wasn't between two separate people with incompatible needs and desires. It was the illusion of separation manifesting as interpersonal discord. When you believe you're fundamentally separate from another person, you automatically create an adversarial dynamic. My needs versus your needs. My perspective versus your perspective. My happiness versus your happiness. The entire relationship becomes a battlefield because the foundational premise is separation. When this couple stopped trying to change each other, stopped trying to fix the relationship, and started recognizing the spiritual perfection already present in both of them, something extraordinary happened. Within months, they discovered a depth of love and understanding they'd never experienced before, not even in their honeymoon phase. The transformation wasn't about learning better communication skills or compromise strategies. It was about dissolving the illusion of separation that had created the conflict in the first place. Their marriage didn't just get restored. It became something entirely new, a spiritual partnership where both individuals could grow while supporting each other's journey. Then there was the war veteran who walked into Wigglesworth's presence carrying the weight of trauma that felt like it would crush him. Severe nightmares, flashbacks that hijacked his nervous system without warning, a constant state of hypervigilance that made normal life feel impossible. Years of therapy and medication had provided minimal relief, and he'd reached the point where he genuinely believed he was permanently damaged, that some part of him had been broken beyond repair by what he'd experienced overseas. Wigglesworth helped him understand something that contradicted everything he'd been told about trauma. His true identity as spiritual consciousness could never be damaged by any experience, no matter how horrific. The memories were real. The emotional reactions were real on the human level, but they had absolutely no power over his spiritual nature, which remained perfect, untouched, whole. This wasn't denial of what happened or minimization of his pain. It was recognition of a deeper reality that existed beneath all experience. He began a daily practice of recognizing himself as consciousness rather than as a traumatized veteran. At first, it felt like grasping at straws, like trying to convince himself of something that clearly wasn't true. But gradually, he started experiencing moments of profound peace that cut through the chaos of his trauma responses. Those moments extended from seconds to minutes to hours to entire days. After a year of this practice, he had found not just personal peace, but a foundation so solid that he began helping other veterans discover the same truth. His transformation became a beacon of hope for others who had lost faith that recovery was even possible. What these stories reveal is that the principles Wigglesworth taught aren't just abstract philosophy. They have direct, measurable impact on the most challenging human situations. But there's a specific way to work with these insights that determines whether they remain inspiring concepts or become lived reality. And that's what we need to explore more deeply. Drop "consciousness is unbreakable" in the comments if you're recognizing that your true nature was never actually damaged by anything you've experienced. The practical application of these principles begins with what Wigglesworth called beholding, and it's one of the most transformative practices you can integrate into your daily life. Beholding means learning to look at every person and situation through spiritual eyes, rather than through the lens of material judgment. When you behold someone, you're not pretending their human personality doesn't exist or that their behavior isn't challenging. You're seeing past the surface appearance to recognize the divine presence that they actually are underneath all the human conditioning and reactivity. Think about someone in your life right now who really challenges you. Maybe it's a difficult coworker, a family member who pushes your buttons, someone who's hurt you or disappointed you repeatedly. Your natural human response is to see them through the filter of all their past actions, to define them by their worst moments, to hold them locked in the prison of your judgment about who they are. But when you practice beholding, you make a conscious decision to see something deeper. You recognize that Christ consciousness, pure divine presence, is the only reality here, not as a mental trick or positive thinking, but as actual truth that exists beneath all appearances. What's remarkable is how this practice dissolves the sense of otherness that creates relationship conflicts in the first place. When you consistently see people as they truly are spiritually, rather than as the limited human personality they're temporarily expressing, something shifts in the entire dynamic between you. They begin responding from their highest nature, because you're no longer holding them captive in your limited expectations of who they should be. You've released them into their spiritual perfection, and somehow that recognition creates space for that perfection to show up more naturally. But beholding isn't just about how you see others. It fundamentally changes how you navigate decisions and challenges in your own life. This is where Wigglesworth's teaching on listening within becomes essential. Most of us make decisions through endless mental analysis. We create pros and cons lists. We consult experts. We research obsessively. We try to figure out the right path through sheer force of human reasoning. And there's nothing wrong with gathering information, but if that's your only decision-making strategy, you're relying entirely on the limited perspective of the human mind. Wigglesworth taught a completely different approach, developing the ability to receive divine guidance directly. This isn't about hearing voices or getting mystical messages from the sky. It's about cultivating sensitivity to the gentle impulses and ideas that arise from your deeper spiritual nature when you create space to listen. Start your day in stillness, not trying to accomplish anything or get anywhere. Just being present and asking one simple question: what would love have me know today? Here's the key. Don't try to hear specific answers. Don't strain to receive clear instructions. Just develop receptivity to what wants to emerge naturally when you stop filling every moment with mental noise and activity. You might feel a subtle sense of direction about a decision you've been struggling with. An idea might arise that you never would have thought of through logical analysis. A feeling of peace about a situation that's been causing anxiety. These are the ways divine intelligence communicates through your consciousness when you're receptive enough to notice. This completely transforms decision-making from struggle into grace. Instead of wrestling with choices, weighing options endlessly, trying to predict outcomes and control results, you learn to feel your way into alignment with what's already known at a deeper level. The perfect path forward already exists in consciousness. You're just learning to become sensitive enough to recognize it when it presents itself. And the beautiful thing is that decisions made from this place of inner listening almost always unfold with a naturalness and ease that decisions made purely from human calculation rarely achieve. The integration of beholding and listening creates a completely different way of moving through life, one where you're responding to spiritual reality rather than reacting to material appearances. Right, I am listening. If you're ready to develop this deeper sensitivity to the guidance that's always available beneath the surface noise of the thinking mind. As you develop this sensitivity to inner guidance, you naturally encounter the next level of Wigglesworth's teaching, which is perhaps the most challenging for those of us conditioned to believe that our survival depends on constant control and effort. He called it releasing into the invisible, and it requires learning to let go of your human attempts to control outcomes and instead trust the spiritual forces that are always working on your behalf, whether you're aware of them or not. When you face a challenge, your automatic response is to immediately start strategizing about how to solve it. Your mind goes into overdrive analyzing options, planning contingencies, trying to anticipate every possible outcome so you can steer things in the direction you want. This feels productive, responsible, like you're taking charge of your life. But Wigglesworth saw this compulsive need to control as one of the primary ways we block the very help we're seeking. When you're gripping a situation so tightly with your limited human understanding, there's no space for divine intelligence to operate with its unlimited perspective and resources. The practice is to consciously release the situation completely into the care of divine intelligence. Not as a last resort when you've exhausted all your options, but as your first response. You acknowledge honestly, I don't know how this will resolve, but I trust spiritual law to bring perfect harmony. This isn't passive resignation where you give up and check out. It's active cooperation with spiritual power. You're making a deliberate decision to stop interfering with divine solutions that are beyond anything your personal mind could conceive or orchestrate. Here's what makes this so powerful. When you release your grip on controlling outcomes, you create space for possibilities that weren't even on your radar. Solutions that could never have appeared while you were forcing things through your limited human strategies suddenly become available. Doors open that you didn't even know existed. The universe has 1,000 ways of resolving situations that your logical mind would never consider, but you can't access those ways while you're insisting things must work out according to your specific plan. This naturally leads into what Wigglesworth called living from grace, which fundamentally transforms your entire relationship with both giving and receiving. Most of us operate from a transaction-based mindset, whether we realize it or not. We believe our good comes from our efforts, our hard work, our strategic planning, our networking, our skill development. We're constantly trying to earn our abundance, to deserve our success, to prove we're worthy of good things happening to us. But grace operates from a completely different principle. It recognizes that your good comes not from your efforts, but from the inexhaustible source within you that gives freely without your having to earn or deserve it. Your supply doesn't flow from your job, your business, your investments, or any external channel. Those are simply the forms through which supply appears, but the actual source is the infinite storehouse of consciousness itself, which can never be depleted and has no limitations or restrictions. When you truly understand this, it transforms how you give and how you receive. You can practice giving without expectation of return because you recognize that you're not giving from your limited personal resources. You're an outlet through which infinite supply flows, and giving actually opens that channel wider rather than depleting you. Generosity becomes joy rather than sacrifice because you know that the source of your abundance can never run dry. Simultaneously, you learn to receive gracefully without guilt, or the compulsive need to reciprocate immediately. When you understand that all good flows from one source expressing through countless different channels, receiving someone's kindness is simply accepting divine grace that happens to be coming through that particular human form in that moment. You don't owe them anything beyond genuine gratitude because you recognize the true source behind all giving and receiving. This shift, from earning to receiving, from controlling to allowing, from personal effort to divine flow creates a completely different quality of life experience, one where ease and naturalness replace struggle and strain. Put, grace is my source. If this is shifting how you think about where your good actually comes from. Now, as you begin integrating these practices into your daily life, you're going to encounter obstacles, and I want to address the most common one head-on because it trips up almost everyone who takes this path seriously. The obstacle is this: You'll be tempted to evaluate your spiritual progress by looking at your human circumstances. When your bank account doesn't immediately reflect abundance consciousness, when your body still shows symptoms despite your recognition of spiritual perfection, when relationships remain challenging even though you're beholding divine presence, the immediate conclusion is that the principles aren't working or that you're doing something wrong. But here's what Wigglesworth understood that most people miss entirely. Spiritual progress is often completely invisible to human sense. Your consciousness might be transforming profoundly at levels you can't see or measure, while your external circumstances temporarily remain unchanged. Think about it like this. When you plant a seed, there's a period where absolutely nothing appears to be happening above ground, even though tremendous growth is occurring beneath the surface. The seed is germinating, roots are forming. The entire foundation for what will eventually break through into visibility is being established. But if you judged the success of planting by what you could see in those first days or weeks, you'd conclude that nothing was working. The real indicators of spiritual growth are internal, not external. Measure your progress by your inner sense of peace, by your growing freedom from fear, by your increasing ability to see through appearances to spiritual reality. Are you less reactive to circumstances than you used to be? Do you have moments of clarity where you recognize truth even when conditions seem to contradict it? Are you finding it easier to trust divine intelligence even when you can't see how situations will resolve? These are the signs that consciousness is transforming, regardless of what's happening in your material world. Trust the process even when you cannot see immediate results. Sometimes, the greatest transformations happen quietly, over extended periods as your new spiritual understanding gradually dissolves old patterns and creates space for entirely new experiences to emerge naturally. The external world is always the last thing to change because it's reflecting consciousness, and consciousness must shift first before the reflection can update. This brings us to what Wigglesworth called the ultimate transformation, and it's where everything we've been discussing comes together into one revelatory recognition. The complete transformation is not about becoming more spiritual, achieving higher consciousness, or finally getting enlightened after years of seeking. It's recognizing that you have never been separate from your source for even one moment. Not for a second. Not during your worst mistakes, not in your deepest suffering, not when you felt most lost or broken. Never. All those years of spiritual seeking, all the practices and techniques and workshops and books, all the striving to become whole, it was all based on a false premise. The premise that you were not already whole, that you were incomplete and needed to find completion, that you were separate and needed to reunite with Source. But separation was always the illusion. Wholeness was always the reality. You were just looking in the wrong direction, trying to find what you already were. Here's the truth that changes everything. You are not a human being on a spiritual journey. You are consciousness itself temporarily appearing as a human, being for the sheer joy of experiencing its own infinite nature, through individual awareness and expression. Every single moment of your existence, whether pleasant or painful, whether you're succeeding or failing by human standards, is consciousness celebrating its own aliveness through the unique perspective that is you. You are literally God's way of experiencing what it's like to be you, with your specific history, your particular challenges, your individual gifts. When this shifts from a beautiful concept to lived recognition, everything transforms, not because your circumstances necessarily change, but because your relationship to all circumstances transforms completely. Comment, I was never separate, if this recognition is beginning to dawn in your awareness right now. So here we are at the end of this exploration into Wigglesworth's most profound teachings, and if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you've just absorbed some of the most transformative, spiritual insights ever articulated. This isn't surface-level content. This is the kind of understanding that can fundamentally shift how you experience every aspect of your life when you let it settle into your consciousness. If you found value in what we've covered today, I genuinely appreciate you hitting that subscribe button, because this is exactly the kind of content I'm committed to bringing you consistently. Deep spiritual wisdom, practical applications, real transformations, not just feel-good platitudes, but actual principles that create measurable shifts in how you navigate reality. There's so much more to explore together, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Leave a comment saying, "This was meant for me," if you feel like this message found you at exactly the right moment. I read every comment, and I'm genuinely curious about how these teachings are landing with you, what questions are arising, what shifts you're already noticing in your awareness. And if this resonated with you, go ahead and tap that like button. It helps this content reach others who are ready for these revelations, people who are genuinely seeking truth beyond the surface-level spiritual content that saturates the internet. Your engagement literally determines who else gets to discover these teachings. Before you go, there's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper into practical application. It complements everything we've discussed today perfectly. Click and continue with me over there. I think you're going to find it incredibly valuable given where your consciousness is right now.